whispers in the dark. Tonight you are about to hear a story that is old enough to have salt dried into its bones. You may think you know it. A mermaid with a longing heart. A prince on a moonlit deck. A bargain paid in pain. But this is not a gentle tale, and it never truly was. Now settle in. Let the room fade. Let the dark become an ocean. Let the sound of your own breathing become the tide. Let's begin. Far beneath the surface, where the water turns from blue to black, and then to something that is not a color at all, there was a kingdom built not of stone, but of living things that remembered being alive. Towers rose from coral shaped like pale antlers. Domes were grown from shells larger than houses, their ridges slick with algae, their insides pearl bright and cold. Gardens drifted like slow motion smoke, forests of seaweed swaying in currents that felt like the long exhale of a creature asleep. Fish moved through it, all like thoughts passing through a mind. In that kingdom lived the Sea King, old as shipwreck iron, with a beard as white as foam. He ruled with the solemn patience of the deep. Beside him, no longer alive, no longer speaking, was the memory of the Sea Queen. Her absence was a pressure in every hall, like the way the sea presses in on a diver's ribs. The Sea King had daughters, 6 of them, each with hair the color of something that could not exist on land. They were raised by the old grandmother, who wore oysters like jewels, and spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had watched too many storms to fear another. The youngest daughter was the one who listened to the kingdom's silences. Her sisters laughed easily. They raced fish. They braided each other's hair with ribbons of eel grass. They rose toward the surface in daring little spirals, then dropped back down into the dark, shrieking with delight. The youngest did not shriek. She watched. She watched the way the light from above broke apart into trembling fingers. She watched the shadows under ledges where the water was colder, where things drifted that were not fish and not plants. She watched the shipwrecks too, scattered across the seafloor like the ribs of dead giants. In the old wood were nails and rings, metal that did not rust the way it should, because the water itself had begun to claim it, making it part of the deep. Sometimes she would find a child's shoe, still laced, still waiting. Sometimes she would find bones, small and pale, picked clean by time. Most merfolk avoided those places, not out of fear, they would have said, but out of respect. The dead belonged to the sea. The youngest did not call it respect. She called it hunger, a hunger to understand what made something end, because the sea, for all its depth, did not have endings the way the land did. Merfolk lived long, 300 years, the grandmother told them, sometimes more if the waters were kind. When their time was done, they did not have graves. They did not have souls that rose like bubbles. They simply dissolved, slowly, quietly, into sea foam. Their bodies became the pale froth that caps the waves, and then even that vanished. No heaven, no after, no immortal thread that continued on when flesh was gone. The grandmother spoke of humans with a strange mixture of scorn and envy. Humans, she said, had lives that burned bright and Humans suffered, humans aged, humans died, but humans had something merfolk did not. They had souls, invisible, undrownable, immortal. When a human died, something went on. Something remembered itself. The youngest listened. The word soul lodged in her like a hook. She asked her grandmother once, in a quiet corner of the coral garden, what a soul looked like. Her grandmother smiled without warmth and pressed a hand against the youngest's chest, right where the heart beat with slow marine steadiness. It looks like longing, the grandmother said. It sounds like the land calling you when you have never seen the land. And it hurts. The youngest daughter should have been afraid of a thing that hurt. Instead, she leaned toward it as if pain were proof. Each mermaid was promised a garden of her own when she turned 15. A small piece of the seafloor to shape with coral and plants. A place to retreat into. A place to display who she was. The sisters filled theirs with bright anemones and glittering fish, with shells arranged into patterns, with statues stolen from wrecks, and polished into strange underwater idols. The youngest planted hers with pale, ghostly flowers that only bloomed in dim water. She placed a single marble statue in the center, a human boy carved in stone. His eyes were blank, but his face was turned upward, toward where the surface waited like a ceiling. She found that statue in a wreck where the wood had been eaten away to lace, and the ropes hung like hair. The boy's stone skin was slick with silt. When she dragged him home, her sisters teased her. "Why bring a land thing down here?" they asked. She did not tell them that she had pressed her ear to the statue's chest and imagined hearing a heartbeat. She did not tell them that the human boy in stone felt like an answer to a question she had not yet learned how to ask. Time moved strangely in the deep, but it moved. Eventually, the oldest sister turned 15, then the next, then the next. One by one, they were allowed to rise to the surface and see the human world, to break the water and breathe the air for a few moments, to watch ships and shorelines from a distance. They returned with stories. They spoke of sunsets that looked like bleeding gold. They spoke of clouds like white mountains. They spoke of forests and cities and the awful smell of smoke and sweat and horses. They laughed about humans stumbling on land with their stiff legs, about the way their voices sounded raw and thin compared to the songs of the sea. But sometimes, when they thought the youngest was not listening, their voices changed. They spoke of churches, places where humans gathered to talk to something invisible. They spoke of bells that rang like metal cries. They spoke of graveyards where stone markers stood like teeth. They spoke of humans holding hands beside those markers and weeping. The youngest mermaid listened with eyes wide, feeling the hook pull. When her own 15th birthday arrived, the sea itself seemed to grow tense around her, as if the deep did not want to let her go. Her grandmother placed a wreath of white lilies on her hair and looked at her for a long time. "Remember," the grandmother said, "the surface is not yours. The air is a thief, The land will not love you back. The youngest nodded, but she was already moving. She swam upward through layers of water that grew warmer, lighter, noisier. The deep's quiet faded. The currents changed. The pressure eased off her bones. Then, with a final push, she broke through. The air hit her like a slap. It was dry, thin, sharp. It tasted like salt and something else, something burning far away. The sky spread above her, vast and impossible. The sun had just begun to sink, and its light made a path across the waves that looked like a road leading straight into fire. She had imagined it would be beautiful. It was, but it was also wrong, in the way a dream can be wrong when you realize you cannot wake up. Not far away, a ship moved across the sea. It was larger than anything she had expected, a wooden beast with masts like trees and sails, billowing like white lungs. Lights glowed along its side. Music drifted over the water, thin, bright, human. She kept her distance at first, watching from between the waves. Then she saw him. A young prince stood on the deck, his hair dark, his face lit by lantern glow. He laughed with the people around him. He raised a cup. He danced, clumsy but joyful, with the ease of someone who believed the world was built to hold him. The youngest mermaid's chest tightened. It was not desire as her sisters described it. It was not simple curiosity. It was a recognition, sudden and violent, like a knife finding a familiar groove in bone. There, she thought, is the shape of my longing. As the night deepened, the celebration grew louder. The ship moved farther out, away from any shore. The moon rose, cold and bright. The sea below remained calm, almost too calm, as if holding its breath. Then the wind changed. It did not arrive like a warning. It arrived like a decision. Clouds rolled in, swallowing the moon. The ship's sails snapped. The music faltered, then vanished under the first crack of thunder. The waves began to rise, not playful, not gentle, but angry, as if something beneath them had been disturbed. The youngest mermaid watched, heart pounding. The storm came fully, sudden and monstrous. Lightning tore the sky open. The sea heaved. The ship groaned like a living creature in pain. She saw people scramble, saw lanterns topple and spill fire that instantly died in rain. She saw the mast bend, saw ropes whip like snakes, and she saw the prince. He had been laughing moments ago. Now his face was pale, eyes wide as the deck pitched under him. He grabbed at a railing. A wave smashed over the side and took two men with it like toys. Another wave struck. The ship lurched. Wood cracked. The sound was enormous, a splitting roar. The youngest mermaid should have fled. Storms could kill merfolk too if they were careless, if they were caught near smashing timbers and spinning anchors. Her sisters had warned her to watch from a safe distance, to treat storms like predators. But the hook in her chest pulled harder. She dove. The water churned with debris, splinters, cloth, broken barrels, ropes that tightened like nooses. She swam through chaos, eyes stinging with salt and grit. Above her, the ship's belly loomed, tilting, shuddering. She heard the screams of humans muffled by water, thin and desperate. Then she saw the prince fall. He disappeared into the black water with a flash of pale hands. For a moment he sank, stunned, hair floating around his face like seaweed. His eyes opened underwater, wide with horror. He tried to swim, but his body moved wrong in the sea. He was not built for this world. His mouth opened, letting bubbles spill out, and she realized with a jolt that he was already drowning. She caught him. His skin was warm, absurdly warm, like a living hearth compared to the cold sea. His chest convulsed. His limbs thrashed weakly. She wrapped her arms around him and kicked downward, away from the wreckage, away from the ship's dying thrash. The storm raged above, but underwater there was a strange quiet, a bubble of muffled sound. The prince's eyes met hers. In them she saw terror, confusion, and something like pleading. His hand clutched her arm with desperate strength. His fingernails bit into her skin. It did not hurt, not yet. She surfaced far from the splintering ship. The wind tore at her hair. Rain stung her face. She held the prince above the waves and swam, muscles burning, toward where she could see a faint, dark line that must be land. As she neared the shore, the sea changed. The waves broke differently, foaming against rocks. The smell of earth rose, heavy and damp. She found a stretch of sand near a large building with white walls and columns that rose like pale ribs. The building looked like a temple, silent in the storm, watching. She dragged the prince onto the sand. His body was limp. His lips were blue. Water poured from his mouth. His eyes were closed. Panic, sharp and animal, clawed at her. She had imagined meeting him in moonlight, singing to him, letting him see her beauty. She had not imagined this, him half dead in her arms, her hands shaking, the storm screaming overhead. She pressed her ear to his chest, a heartbeat, faint but there. She pushed on his ribs the way she had once seen sailors do to each other on a wreck, imitating what she had observed from a distance. She tilted his head. Water coughed out. Then, with a convulsive gasp, he breathed. The sound was ugly and miraculous. He lay there trembling, alive. The youngest mermaid leaned back, rain mixing with tears she did not understand. She wanted to stay. She wanted to watch him wake and see her. She wanted him to look at her and recognize what she felt. But footsteps sounded nearby, running on wet sand. Voices, human voices, carried over the storm. The youngest mermaid froze. A group of young women appeared, cloaks whipping, hair plastered to their faces. They had been in the temple or near it, perhaps sheltered. They saw the prince and cried out. They rushed to him, lifting his head, checking his breath. The youngest mermaid sank into the shallows, hiding behind a rock, only her eyes above the water. One of the young women, the one closest, knelt by the prince's face. Her hands were gentle. She spoke words the youngest could not understand, but the tone was tender. The prince's eyelids fluttered. He looked up. His gaze was unfocused. The storm's chaos spun in his eyes. He saw the young woman above him, her face framed by rain and torchlight, and his lips moved. A name, perhaps, or a prayer. The youngest mermaid felt something twist inside her. A new pain, not physical, but sharp all the same. The humans carried the prince away. The youngest watched until they vanished into the darkness, leaving only footprints that the waves erased. She stayed in the water long after the storm moved on, long after the clouds thinned and the moon returned like a pale coin. The sea calmed as if nothing had happened. In the distance, bits of wreckage bobbed like bones. The youngest mermaid did not go back down right away. She floated, staring at the temple's silhouette. For the first time, she understood the grandmother's word in her chest. Longing. It did not feel like romance. It felt like starvation. When she finally returned to her garden, the statue of the human boy seemed to watch her with blank eyes. She touched its stone cheek. It was cold, dead, safe. But she had held warmth in her arms, and she could not forget it. In the days that followed, she rose to the surface again and again, hiding among waves, watching the shore, watching for the prince. She learned the shape of the coastline. She learned where the palace stood, a great structure on the land, its windows flashing in sunlight. She watched ships come and go. She listened to human voices and began to recognize patterns, laughter, anger, song. Her sisters noticed her absences. They teased her at first, then grew wary. "What are you doing up there so often?" they asked, their eyes narrowing. "There are sharks. There are nets. There are humans with harpoons." The youngest did not answer. How could she explain that her chest was no longer her own, that something invisible had taken up residence there, gnawing? Her grandmother watched her too, with the tired look of someone who had seen this story begin before. "You are thinking of the land," her grandmother said one evening, voice low. The youngest mermaid pressed her palms together, as if prayer might make her honest. "I want," she began. Her grandmother cut her off. "You want an immortal soul," the grandmother said, as if the words tasted bitter. "You have heard the stories. You think love can buy you what the sea cannot give." The youngest flinched. "Is it true?" she whispered. "If a human loves me enough, if he marries me, will his soul flow into me? Will I become a part of his forever?" Her grandmother's eyes were dark pearls. "It is what the old laws say," she admitted. "If a human loves you so deeply that you become more to him than his own kind, if he takes you as his wife and you are bound to him, then yes. A piece of his immortal soul would be shared with you, and you would gain one of your own." The youngest mermaid's breath caught, but the grandmother continued, "Love is not a coin you can demand. And humans do not fall in love the way merfolk dream. They are creatures of eyes and voices and lies. They love what they believe they see, not what is true. The youngest mermaid stared at her garden, at the pale flowers swaying. "I will make him see me," she said. Her grandmother's face tightened. "Then you are thinking of her," the grandmother said softly. "The sea witch." The youngest mermaid's sisters grew quiet. Even they, reckless as they were, did not like speaking of that place. Far beyond the kingdom, beyond gardens and palaces, beyond the safe paths where merfolk swam, there was a stretch of sea that felt wrong. The water there was thick, stagnant, as if it did not circulate. The sunlight did not reach it even at noon. The ground was mud, and from that mud rose twisted trees that were not trees, long black stalks with pale bulbs that pulsed faintly, like organs. In that region lived the sea witch. Some called her a witch. Some called her a sorceress. Some called her something older, a name that did not translate into human language, a word that meant the hunger that lives in a mouth that never closes. The youngest mermaid went anyway. She swam alone into water that grew colder and darker with every stroke. The sea around her became quiet in a way that felt alert, like a room where everyone has stopped talking because someone dangerous has entered. The fish were sparse. The plants were wrong. The black stalks rose like drowned fingers. Pale bulbs swelled and pulsed. When she brushed one by accident, it shivered, and she swore she heard a faint, wet sigh. Her heart pounded. Her throat felt tight. She told herself she was brave. But bravery was not the absence of fear. It was the willingness to walk into it. At last, she saw the witch's dwelling. It was not a house. It was a heap of bones and shipwreck fragments and coral that looked like teeth. The entrance gaped like a mouth. Inside, dim green light flickered, not from fire, but from something bioluminescent that felt sickly, as if the light itself had a fever. The youngest mermaid hovered at the entrance. The water around her tasted metallic. Then the witch spoke. "Come in, little princess," the voice said, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating through her ribs. The youngest mermaid forced herself forward. Inside, the sea witch waited, a massive figure seated on a mound of debris. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched over a shape that was not quite mermaid, not quite octopus, not quite human. Her hair floated around her head in thick dark tangles like drowned rope. Her eyes were yellow, lidless, unblinking. Around her were strange things, bottles filled with swirling liquid dead fish arranged in patterns, shards of mirrors that caught the green light and threw it back in broken pieces. And there were creatures. Polyp-like beings crawled along the walls, their mouths opening and closing silently. Eels coiled in bowls. A crab scuttled over a human skull, clicking softly as if laughing. The youngest mermaid's stomach churned. The sea witch smiled, revealing teeth too many and too sharp. So the witch said, "You have come for legs." The youngest mermaid's voice trembled. "I want to go to the human world," she said. "I want to be with the prince. I want an immortal soul." At the word soul, the witch's eyes glittered. the witch murmured. That old hunger. I can help you. The youngest mermaid swallowed. What do you want in return? She asked, though she already knew the answer would hurt. The witch leaned forward. The water around her seemed to grow thicker, syrupy, as if it resisted movement. Your voice, the witch said. The youngest mermaid's hand flew to her throat. My voice, she whispered. The witch nodded slowly, savoring. Your voice is the loveliest in the sea, little princess. It is pure. It is sharp. It could cut glass. It could call sailors to their deaths if you wished. You do not, but you could. That kind of voice is rare. I want it. The youngest mermaid's eyes stung. If I have no voice, how will I make him love me? She pleaded. The witch's smile widened. Your face will do, the witch said. Your eyes will do. Your body will do. Humans love what they see. The youngest mermaid's nails dug into her palms. And the potion, she said, what will it do? The witch's expression shifted into something almost reverent. When you drink it, the witch said, your tail will split and shrink and twist into 2 legs. It will feel as if a sharp sword passes through your body. The youngest mermaid went still. A sharp sword, she echoed. The witch nodded. Every step you take on those legs will feel as if you are walking on knife blades. The witch continued, voice calm as prayer. Your feet will bleed, though humans may not always see it. But you will look graceful to them. You will dance like a dream, even while you suffer. The youngest mermaid's breath came fast. And if he loves me, she asked, if he marries me, then you will gain a soul, the witch said, and you will never return to the sea. The youngest mermaid trembled. The thought of never returning should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like freedom. But the witch added, and her voice turned silky, if the prince does not love you more than anyone else, if he marries another, then on the morning after his wedding you will die. Your heart will break, and you will become sea foam. The youngest mermaid's mouth went dry. Sea foam, she whispered. The witch's eyes did not blink. Those are the terms. The youngest mermaid stared at the witch, at the bottles, at the bones, at the green sick light. She thought of the prince's warm skin. She thought of the human girl kneeling beside him in the storm, the way his eyes had opened to her face. Jealousy surged like poison. I accept, the youngest mermaid said. The sea witch moved with sudden speed. A long, pale arm shot out and seized the youngest mermaid's chin, tilting her face up. Open your mouth, the witch commanded. The youngest mermaid obeyed, shaking. The witch's other hand produced a shell knife, curved and sharp. She pressed it against the youngest's tongue. For a moment, time stopped. The youngest mermaid saw her reflection in a shard of mirror. Eyes wide, mouth open, tongue trembling. The knife moved. Pain exploded, bright and white, so intense it felt like light. The youngest mermaid's body convulsed. Bubbles burst from her mouth, mixed with dark blood that clouded the water. She tried to scream, but the scream was cut off before it could exist. Her tongue was severed, her voice ripped out at the root. The sea witch caught the blood in a bottle as it drifted, as if it were precious. The witch's mouth opened, and she swallowed something, maybe the tongue, maybe the sound itself. The youngest mermaid clutched her throat, choking on her own blood, eyes streaming. The witch watched with delight. There, the witch said, almost kindly, "It is done." The witch handed her a bottle filled with liquid that shimmered, not like water, but like something alive. It swirled with colors that made the youngest mermaid nauseous to look at. It smelled, even underwater, like bitter smoke and rotting flowers. "Drink it when you reach the shore," the witch instructed. "Sit on the sand. The potion will do the rest. When you rise, you will be human." The youngest mermaid could not speak. She nodded, clutching the bottle with shaking hands. As she fled the witch's dwelling, the water behind her seemed to pulse, and she felt, rather than heard, the witch's laughter vibrating through the sea, following her like a shadow. The journey back to the kingdom was blurred by pain. Blood still seeped from her mouth. Every swallow burned. She tried to hum to calm herself and found only silence. The absence of her voice was like an amputation. It made her dizzy. Her sisters met her on the way, alarmed by the blood, by her wild eyes, by the way she clutched the bottle. "What have you done?" they demanded, but their voices sounded far away, as if she were underwater, which she was. But this was different. The youngest could only shake her head. She could not explain. She could not sing. She could not even cry out her fear. She rose to the surface before dawn. The sky was pale, bruised with early light. The shore lay ahead, quiet, waiting. She swam until her fingers scraped sand. The water shallowed. The smell of land filled her nose, damp and heavy. She crawled onto the beach, dragging her tail behind her like a secret. Then she lifted the bottle to her lips. The potion tasted like burning. It was thick, and it slid down her throat with a heat that felt unnatural, as if she were swallowing fire underwater. Her stomach clenched. The world spun. She collapsed onto the sand. At first, there was only nausea and dizziness. Then, slowly, the pain began. It started at the tip of her tail, a deep internal pressure, as if her bones were being squeezed. The scales along her tail shivered. Then the sensation sharpened, turning into something like tearing. She arched, silent, mouth open, eyes wide, but no sound came. It felt exactly as the witch promised, like a sharp sword forced through her body. Her tail convulsed. The flesh split, not cleanly, but raggedly, as if something inside her was clawing its way out. She saw, with horror, the fin at the end of her tail twist and shrink, the webbing collapsing, the structure rearranging itself in grotesque slow motion. The split continued upward, dividing her tail into two halves that wriggled independently like severed creatures. The bones inside cracked, reshaping, snapping into new angles. Blood soaked the sand. She tried to scream. No voice came. The sun rose and painted the world in warm light that mocked her suffering. Gulls cried overhead. The sea sighed behind her, indifferent. At last, the tearing stopped. She lay trembling, drenched in sweat and blood, her body feeling wrong, unfamiliar, exposed. Where her tail had been, there were legs, 2 pale human legs, trembling violently, streaked with blood where the skin had split and healed too quickly, leaving thin scars like faint lightning. Her feet were delicate, almost too delicate, as if the witch had sculpted them to look beautiful rather than functional. The youngest mermaid stared at them, as if they belonged to someone else. Then the second promise arrived. Pain flared in her feet, sharp and immediate, as if she had placed them directly on knives. She gasped silently, mouth forming the shape of a cry that could not exist. The sand under her feet felt like glass. The world tilted. She tried to stand. Her legs shook. The moment her feet pressed fully into the ground, agony shot up through her body. It was not a simple ache. It was a slicing, shredding sensation, like every grain of sand had become a blade. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, because that was the only way to keep from trying to scream. Still, she stood. She forced herself upright. The air hit her again, colder now that her skin was more exposed. The wind raised goose flesh. She realized she was naked. Before shame could fully form, she heard voices. Humans approached, servants perhaps, walking along the beach. They saw her. This strange, beautiful girl collapsed on the sand, bloodied, trembling, silent. They cried out and rushed to her. Hands touched her arms. A cloak was thrown around her shoulders. She flinched at every contact because pain echoed everywhere, not just in her feet, but in her whole body, as if transformation had left her nerves raw. They spoke to her, but she could not answer. She tried to form words. Her throat moved. No voice emerged. The humans exchanged concerned glances. They lifted her carefully, but even being carried caused her feet to brush against fabric, and each brush felt like a cut. She clenched her jaw so hard her teeth ached. They brought her to the palace. The palace smelled of stone warmed by sun, of polished wood, of flowers too sweet, of humans, so many humans, their bodies radiating heat. The halls were bright with windows. The ceiling felt impossibly high. Everything was dry. Her skin missed the water like lungs miss air. They bathed her, and water poured over her head in a rush that made her panic at first, until she realized she could still breathe. But the water was not seawater. It did not taste like home. It was flat, empty. They dressed her in fine cloth, soft as sea foam, and it clung to her skin. They combed her hair, which dried into waves. They adorned her with jewelry. They tried to make her look like a noble lady. She stood among them like a ghost, wearing a costume. Then the prince arrived. She saw him at the end of a hall, walking toward her with curious eyes. He was alive. His cheeks were flushed with health. His hair was combed. He wore rich clothing, and his hands were clean. No sign that he had ever been in a storm. No sign that he had ever been dragged from death. For a moment, something inside her loosened, like the hook had finally found purchase. He smiled at her. "Who are you?" he asked, voice warm. "Where did you come from?" She opened her mouth, and only silence came out. The prince's smile faded into concern. He stepped closer. He looked into her face with fascination, as if her beauty were a puzzle. "You cannot speak," he realized. She shook her head, throat tightening. She tried to show him with her hands. She touched her throat. She pointed toward the sea. The prince laughed softly, not cruelly, but with the amusement of someone who thinks this is charming. "A mute little foundling from the sea," he said, almost delighted. "Then you must stay here. We will take care of you." He took her hand. His fingers were warm. His palm was calloused slightly, the hand of someone who fenced, who rode, who touched real things. The contact sent a shiver through her. Not pain, something else, something that felt like hope with teeth. From that day on, the prince kept her close. He gave her rooms near his own. He had servants tend to her. He asked her to sit with him, to walk with him, to attend him as he moved through palace life. She followed. Every step was a blade. She learned quickly that the witch had not exaggerated. Walking was agony. It was not a pain that dulled with time. It was a pain that stayed sharp, fresh, as if her feet were always newly wounded. Sometimes she looked down and saw faint red spots, blood seeping into the fabric of her slippers. Sometimes she saw nothing, and that was worse, because it meant the pain was coming from somewhere deeper, from inside her bones, from the memory of her tail screaming that it should not be this way. But she did not slow. She did not complain. She could not complain. The prince adored her silence. He treated it as innocence, as purity. He spoke to her endlessly, telling her about his life, his dreams, his plans. He spoke of traveling to distant lands. He spoke of his longing for a wife, someone who would understand him. He spoke, one night, of a memory that made the youngest mermaid's blood run cold. "I once was saved," he said, sitting beside her in a garden lit by lanterns. "Years ago, I was caught in a terrible storm. I would have died, but someone saved me. I woke on the shore near the great temple, and the first face I saw was a girl. I have never forgotten her. I have searched for her in every crowd. I believe she was meant for me." The youngest mermaid's hands clenched in her lap. Her throat burned. She wanted to shout, "It was me. I carried you. I dragged you. I gave you breath." But all that came was silence and the taste of old blood. The prince smiled at her, unaware of the horror blooming behind her eyes. "You remind me of the sea," he said softly. "Sometimes when I look at you, I think of her, but you are not her. Still, I love you in my own way. You are dear to me, like a child, like a friend. Like a child, like a friend." The words struck her with the force of a wave smashing her into rock. The hook in her chest twisted. Days passed, weeks. She learned the palace, its hidden corners, its smells. She learned to move with grace despite pain, because the witch had given her that too, a body that looked light and effortless even while it suffered. She danced for the prince when he asked, and dancing was worse than walking, because it demanded more pressure on her feet. It demanded spinning, leaping, landing. Each movement felt like stepping on knives. But the humans cheered. They called her miraculous. They praised her beauty. They praised her devotion. The prince watched with shining eyes. She danced until her vision blurred. She danced until her feet felt like they were no longer attached to her, like she was a puppet held up by pain alone. When she finished, she would smile, because she had learned that humans loved smiles. Then she would collapse in her rooms and press her feet into cold water, biting her lip as the pain continued anyway, indifferent to comfort. At night, when the palace slept, she would sometimes crawl to a balcony overlooking the sea. She would stare at the dark water below and feel an ache so deep it seemed to hollow her out. She could not return, not without dying, and still she missed it. She missed the way water held her. She missed the songs of her sisters. She missed her own voice most of all, the way it used to fill her chest and spill out into the world, the way it used to make her feel real. Now she was a beautiful silent thing, kept like a pet. Below the waves, her sisters watched. They rose near the palace sometimes, hiding among rocks, glimpsing her in windows. They saw her walking stiffly, saw her smile like a mask. They saw the prince beside her, never leaving her, always kind, always affectionate, always unaware. They went back down and told their grandmother. The grandmother's face grew gray with dread. "She has done it," the grandmother whispered. "She has given up her voice. She has taken the bargain." The sisters wept. Their tears became pearls that sank into the sand. "We must help her," they said. But help from the sea was not simple. The youngest had made her choice. The laws were old. The witches' bargains were not easily undone. Then news came that shattered what little hope remained. A foreign princess was arriving. The palace filled with preparations. Servants hurried. Banners were hung. Flowers were arranged. The prince's parents smiled in that careful political way. Rumors ran through halls like rats. The prince was to be married. The youngest mermaid felt it before anyone told her. As if her body recognized the future the way an animal smells smoke. When the prince finally spoke of it, he did so gently, sitting beside her again, holding her hand. "My parents have long wished me to marry," he said. "I have resisted. I wanted to marry only the girl who saved me, the one from the temple. Now, they have arranged for me to meet a princess from a neighboring kingdom. They say she was raised in that very temple. They say she is the one." The youngest mermaid's vision narrowed. Her ears rang. He continued, unaware. "I will meet her," he said. "If she truly is the one, then it must be fate. But do not fear, my dear. You will always have a place at my side. A place, not a vow, not a soul. A place. The princess arrived. The court gathered. Musicians played. The prince descended the grand stairs to greet her. The youngest mermaid stood among the crowd, silent, her hands cold. The foreign princess stepped forward, veiled, then lifted the veil. She was beautiful in the way humans liked. Her eyes were bright, her skin glowed. She smiled at the prince, and when she spoke, her voice rang clear, warm, human. The youngest mermaid felt her stolen voice echo in her memory, a phantom limb that ached. She watched the prince's face change, the way his eyes widened, the way his mouth parted, the way recognition flooded him. It was not true recognition. It was a story he wanted to believe, a shape he had chased for years. The princess fit it. He took her hands. He spoke with excitement. "It is you," he said. "You were at the temple. You were the first face I saw. You saved me." The princess looked surprised for a brief moment. Then her smile returned, smooth as silk. "Yes," she said softly, "it was I." The youngest mermaid's stomach turned. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to shake him, to force the truth into his ears. But she had no voice, and humans did not understand the language of eyes when it mattered. The prince fell in love quickly, or he believed he did. He walked with the princess through gardens. He laughed with her. He looked at her as if she were the answer to his prayers. The youngest mermaid followed behind, each step a cut, each smile a wound. At night, she dreamed of the sea witch's yellow eyes. She dreamed of her tongue lying in a bottle, floating like a pale worm. She dreamed of becoming foam, her body dissolving into nothing, her longing finally satisfied by obliteration. The wedding was announced. There would be a grand celebration. There would be a ship voyage, for the prince wished to marry at sea, under open sky, with the waves as witness. The youngest mermaid heard this and felt dread coil around her spine. The sea, her home, would become the stage for her end. The day of the wedding came. The palace shimmered with gold and noise. Bells rang from distant towers. People shouted blessings. The bride wore white. The prince wore a smile so bright it seemed to erase everything else. The youngest mermaid walked behind them, each step a scream she could not release. Her feet bled into her slippers. She could feel the warm wetness. She could smell iron. The pain was so constant, it had become the rhythm of her existence. They boarded the ship. The sea was calm, almost unnaturally calm, as if remembering the storm that once took the prince and deciding to be gentle now, to make the tragedy cleaner. Lanterns were hung along the deck. Music played. The bride and groom stood under a canopy and spoke vows. The youngest mermaid stood among the guests, her heart a clenched fist. When the prince kissed the bride, something inside the youngest mermaid cracked. It was not a dramatic break, not a shattering sound. It was a quiet fissure, like ice beginning to split. Night fell. The celebration continued. People drank. People danced. The bride laughed, her voice carrying across the water like a bell. The youngest mermaid moved to the edge of the deck and stared down into the sea. The waves lapped softly, as if whispering. Then from the darkness, she saw them. Shapes rose through the water. At first, she thought they were seaweed. Then she realized they were hair, long and floating. Faces emerged, pale under moonlight, eyes wide with terror and determination. Her sisters, they had come. They clung to the side of the ship, hidden from the humans by shadow. Their hair had been cut short, ragged, as if hacked away. The youngest mermaid's eyes widened in horror. Their hair, their pride, their beauty sacrificed. One sister lifted a hand, and in it gleamed something metal. A knife. Its blade was long, sharp, glinting with a strange sheen, as if forged from moonlight and despair. The sister's mouth moved, forming words, and though the youngest could not hear underwater speech from this angle, she understood anyway, because she knew her sisters' faces. "We gave our hair to the sea witch," the sister mouthed, tears mixing with salt. "We begged her. We traded what we could. She gave us this." The knife rose higher. "If you kill the prince," the sister mouthed, "and let his blood fall on your feet, you can become a mermaid again. Before sunrise, before you turn to foam." The youngest mermaid stared at the knife, as if it were a living thing. "Kill him." The words were monstrous. The sister's expression twisted with desperation. "You must," she mouthed, "or you will die. You will become nothing. Please." The youngest mermaid's hands trembled. She reached down and took the knife. The handle was cold, slick. The blade felt heavy, eager. Her sisters sank back into the sea, their faces vanishing, leaving her alone with the weapon and the choice. She stood on the deck, surrounded by humans who laughed and drank, unaware that a murder had just been placed into her hands like a gift. The knife's edge caught lantern light and flashed. The youngest mermaid looked toward the cabin where the newlyweds slept. Her feet throbbed. Her heart pounded. The witch's laughter seemed to vibrate in the ship's wood. She moved. Each step toward the cabin was agony. Knife blades underfoot. Knife blade in hand. Pain above and below, inside and out. She reached the cabin door. It was slightly open. Music and laughter outside covered the sound of her movement. Inside, the room was dim. The air smelled of perfume and warm human skin. The prince lay asleep beside his bride. His face was relaxed, innocent in sleep, as if he had never made a choice that destroyed someone else. The bride slept too, her hair spread on the pillow like dark water. The youngest mermaid stood over them, knife raised. Her arms shook. Tears streamed down her face. She imagined it, the blade sinking into the prince's chest, blood spilling, his eyes opening in shock, his mouth forming her name, though he did not know it. The warmth of his blood running over her feet, washing away pain, restoring her tail, sending her back into the sea. She imagined it, and something inside her recoiled so violently it felt like nausea. She loved him, and love, she realized in that moment, was not possession. It was not hunger. It was not bargaining. Love was the willingness to be hurt without making someone else bleed for it. Her hands lowered. She looked at the prince's face one last time, trying to memorize it, because soon she would have no eyes to remember with, only foam. Then she turned away. She walked out of the cabin and onto the deck. The night air hit her like a final breath. The sea spread around the ship, dark and endless. She lifted the knife. For a moment, she considered turning it on herself. But the witch's bargain did not mention that. The sea did not care about her shortcuts. So instead, she threw the knife far out into the water. It flashed once in moonlight, then vanished with a small splash. She moved to the railing and climbed it, despite the pain, despite her trembling legs. Below, the sea waited. She looked toward the horizon. Dawn was a faint gray hint. It would come soon. She whispered without sound, a prayer to nothing. Then she let herself fall. The water swallowed her. For a moment, it felt like coming home. The coolness wrapped around her. The sea held her weight. The pain in her feet dulled slightly, softened by water. Then her body began to change. Not back into a mermaid. Not into anything. Her skin tingled. Her limbs felt light. Her fingers blurred. The edges of her body became indistinct, as if she were dissolving. She tried to move, but her arms were no longer solid enough to push water. Her hair floated away from her scalp like strands separating from cloth. She understood then what becoming sea foam truly meant. It was not a peaceful fatting. It was unmaking. She felt her memories loosen, as if the sea were plucking them from her like scales. The image of the prince's face began to smear. The sound of her sisters' laughter grew distant. Even the pain in her feet started to evaporate, not because it healed, but because the part of her that could feel it was disappearing. She wanted to hold onto something, anything. Her longing, the hook in her chest, tugged one last time. Then it snapped. She rose toward the surface, not swimming, but drifting, because she no longer had muscles, only a suggestion of form. She broke through the water as foam. White froth spread across the waves, bright under the growing dawn. If a human looked, they would see nothing but sea spray. But the youngest mermaid was there, in that foam, aware in a scattered way, like a mind broken into mist. She watched the ship sail on. She watched the prince wake and step onto the deck, smiling, holding his bride. She watched him look at the sea, perhaps remembering the storm long ago, perhaps thinking of the silent girl he had called dear, perhaps not thinking of her at all. The foam drifted. The wind moved it. The sun rose. And then something unexpected happened. The foam did not vanish completely. Instead, it gathered. It lifted. The youngest mermaid felt herself pulled upward, not by water, but by air. The sensation was strange. The sea had always held her, pressing in. Air did not press. Air let go. Air was emptiness. And yet, something in that emptiness caught her, cradled her, shaped her again. She found herself suspended above the waves, not as a mermaid, not as a human, but as something else. Something like a figure made of faint light and cool wind. Around her, others appeared, shapes rising from mist, pale faces, gentle eyes. The daughters of the air. They looked at her with sympathy that pierced deeper than any knife. Who, she tried to ask, but she had no voice. She did not have a throat anymore. Yet somehow they understood. You have suffered, they told her without words. You chose not to kill. You chose not to stain your feet with blood. Because of that, you are not lost. The youngest mermaid felt confusion ripple through her new form. No soul, she tried to say. I have no soul. Not yet, the air daughters replied. But you can earn one. They showed her, in a flicker of images, the strange law that governed their existence. The daughters of the air did not have immortal souls either, not fully. But they could gain them through good deeds, through gentle acts, through easing human suffering. Over 300 years, if they did enough, if they gathered enough kindness like dew, they would be granted an immortal soul. 300 years, the same length as a mermaid's life. The youngest mermaid felt something shift. Not hope, not quite. Something heavier. Something like purpose, laced with dread. Because she understood what the air daughters did not say out loud. She would be near humans again. Always near. Watching them live their brief, bright lives. Watching them love, suffer, die, while she remained, year after year, unseen, unheard, a silent witness. It was a different kind of horror than the sea witch's bargain. A slower horror, an endless one. She drifted above the sea and looked down at the foam still breaking against waves. She remembered the pain, the silence, the knife, the choice. She remembered the prince's sleeping face, the way she had loved him enough not to kill him. Love had not given her what she wanted, but it had kept her from becoming a monster. The daughters of the air guided her away from the ship, away from the palace, away from the shore. They moved over rooftops and forests and fields. The world below was vast, loud, and alive. And everywhere, humans suffered in small ways and large ones. Children cried, mothers wept, men fought. Lovers broke each other's hearts. Old people lay alone in beds and stared at ceilings, waiting for a final breath. The youngest mermaid felt her longing return, not for a prince, not for a wedding, but for meaning. If she could not have a soul given, then she would claw her way toward one. Yet the horror remained, because she knew she would never truly belong anywhere. Not in the sea, not on land, not even in air. She would always be a creature made from sacrifice, hovering at the edge of worlds, carrying the weight of a choice that no one else would ever understand. And somewhere far below, in the cold, dark region where the water thickened and the black stalks pulsed, the sea witch still lived. Perhaps the witch kept the youngest mermaid's voice in a bottle, swirling it like a captured storm. Perhaps the witch sometimes uncorked it, just to hear the faintest echo of a scream that never made it to the surface. Perhaps on certain nights, when the wind is right, you can stand by the shore and hear something in the crash of waves that does not sound like water at all. Something like a girl trying to speak. Something like longing. Years passed, in the way years pass differently when you are not human. The youngest mermaid, now a daughter of the air, learned how to touch the world without being seen. She learned how to cool a fevered forehead with a gust of wind. She learned how to carry the scent of flowers into a sick room so someone could smile one last time. She learned how to guide a lost child toward home with the rustle of leaves. She learned how to stand beside grieving people and make their candles burn a little steadier. Each good deed was a thread. Each thread was a fragile stitch in something that might one day become a soul. But the horror of her story never left her, because the sea did not forget, and neither did the part of her that had been born there. Sometimes she drifted back over the ocean and looked down. She saw ships crossing like insects. She saw storms gather and break. She saw waves rise and fall, endless, indifferent. Sometimes she saw foam, white froth at the crest of a wave, and she remembered how it felt to dissolve. She remembered how it felt to be nothing. She remembered the knife in her hand, and she understood that the true terror of her tale was not the witch, not the pain, not even death. It was choice, the unbearable weight of a single moment when you could become a monster. When the world gives you every reason, every excuse, every desperate plea to do it, and you decide not to, because you would rather be destroyed than do that kind of destroying. There are nights, the daughters of the air whispered, when humans tell stories like this and think they are only stories. They sit safe in their houses. They listen with pleasant fear. They shiver and smile, and then turn on lights and go to sleep. But the sea does not end when the story ends. The sea keeps moving. The bargains keep being made. The longing keeps growing in hearts that do not know what to do with it. And somewhere, some other girl is staring upward through dark water at the trembling fingers of light, feeling the hook in her chest, and thinking that pain is proof. If you have listened this far, you have carried her story into your mind, into the warm air of your room. You have given her what she was denied in life, a voice. So now, when you hear waves at night, when you hear wind scrape along your window, when you hear a faint sound that might be foam shifting on sand, remember this. Not every horror story is about what chases you. Some are about what you chase, and what it costs, and what part of you is left behind, silent in a bottle, waiting. And now we come to the end. If you enjoyed this tale, if it made your skin prickle and your imagination drift toward dark water, please take a moment to support the channel. Like the video, subscribe if you want more stories like this, and leave a comment on whether you think 300 years of good deeds is salvation or another kind of curse. Thank you for listening. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment.